Okay, this is the Sam Oxer Jr. Racing Channel, formerly the show channel, but now it's the racing channel. You know, we keep changing. But anyway, we have a super guest today from longtime NASCAR, NHRA motorcycle. Uh, it's an honor really to bring this legend on. And let's welcome Colbert Seagraves. How you doing, Colbert?
Doing fine, Sam. Hope you are.
Hey, I'm alive and kicking. That's all we can expect, God. So, what? Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Live there. How long have you been in Winston-Salem? Forever?
Well, since I was 13, we moved down here from Washington D.C. when I was 13. 1969, the federal government made the tobacco companies. They forbidded them to advertise on TV and radio. Right. And R.J. Reynolds had a $70 million budget for television and radio advertising. So they had to figure out how to spend that money. So they brought 5 of their top sales division managers from around the country into Winston-Salem to figure that out. And my father, Ralph, was one of them.
Yeah. I read up on both of you a little bit on the internet. Can't hide from the internet, But and I see you are now with the museum. And what happened actually with the museum, Seagraves?
Well, unfortunately, back in 2015, R.J. Reynolds acquired Newport cigarettes. And when they did, the government, as they always do in their wonderful wisdom, decided that R.J. Reynolds had to divest themselves of 2 of their cigarette brands. So they gave up Salem's and Winston's. And a company out of the United Kingdom bought Winston's and Salem's, ITG. They're based out of Texas, but their home company is in England. So in 2017, they had their 2-year anniversary, and they contacted Will Spencer, who owned the museum, and we had a 53-foot museum trailer that we took around to the Cup races. Back then, it was Winston Cup, and well, I take that back. It was Winston Cup back in the day, but right. We took the museum trailer around, and adult fans could go through and look at some of the history. So we took that to their second anniversary party, and it was a big hit. So they approached Will and Christy, I guess in 2019, wanting them to take the trailer to events and whatnot. And Will gave them a budget for doing it. And they said, well, no, we wanted you to do it for free because we own Winston and you're using all our stuff. And, all these artifacts that you have belong to us. And Will said, well, it cost me $3,000 to put tires on the trailer, so I can't do it for free. And they said, well, if you don't, then we're going to sue you. So they sued him, and they lost the first lawsuit. And they sued him again and lost the second lawsuit. And the third lawsuit, they sued him again. And each time it was with prejudice, so they couldn't come back with the same thing, but they just reworded it. And finally, Will and Christy, after 3.5-4 years of this, and over $1.5 million in attorney fees, after this third lawsuit, they agreed to change the name of the museum, but we didn't have to give anything up. We proved everything was either donated by R.J. Reynolds or we bought it. And Will had the receipts and the canceled checks, so their standing didn't hold water. They did get to have a copy of the Winston Champions ring, the perpetual Winston All-Star Race trophy, and then the big 25th anniversary mural that we had painted, and they got to have copies of those. But that's the only artifacts that they got. Well, changing the name just pretty much didn't work. I mean, for 19 years it had been the Winston Cup Museum, and calling it anything but that. I mean, the reason we did it the reason Will did it in the first place was to thank R.J. Reynolds for 33 years, and it was a gift to the city of Winston-Salem.
Right.
And so, basically, we decided to shut the museum down. We took 33 of the race cars to Kissimmee, Florida, and sold them in 2024. And Will, it crushed me. And Will, he still has several race cars that are special. He still has the 1970 Dodge Daytona that was Dave Marcus's, and it was the Goodies show car, and then we purposed it as the Winston show car for the final race in Homestead back in 2003.
Wow. That, it's a long history there. I know you started out back with Junior Johnson in those days.
I was 15 years old in 1972 and worked in Bobby Allison's pit crew for Junior. And my first race working for Junior was the Firecracker 400 in Daytona, July 4th weekend of 72.
Wow.
And R.J. Reynolds had brokered a deal with IMSA to sponsor the IMSA series, the sports car series with the Camel brand. It was called the Camel GT Challenge. And they were going to make the big announcement at Daytona, and they had a Pantera that Hallman and Moody had built and modified, and they had it all painted up with Camel. And so my dad went to Richard Petty, and he said, "Richard, we're going to do this press conference. I'd like for you to drive the car around the track." And Richard laughed at him and said, "Well, I'll do it for $10,000. And Dad said, "Well, I'm not going to pay you anything." And Bobby Allison said, "Well, I'll do it for free." And so Dad said, "Well, Bobby, you do it." And so when I heard Bobby was going to drive, I went over to my dad and I said, "Hey," I said, "can I ride with Bobby?" And he said, "Absolutely not. Your mother will kill me." So I just, 15-year-old kid, I just wore him out, and he said, "Okay, you can ride with him." And he tells Bobby, he said, "Well, just do me a favor. If something happens to him, his mother will kill me. Just keep it down on the apron, go around the track." Yeah. So we get in the car. Bobby's got his helmet and his fire suit on. I've got on blue jeans and a tank top. And we've got seat belts, but there's no roll cage, and we're on street tires. And Bobby takes off down pit road, and he looks at me and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, let's go fast." And so we averaged 198 miles an hour around Daytona, and it was unbelievable. We come into the pits, and Bobby looks at me and he said, "What'd you think?" I said, "Man, that's the greatest thing I've ever done." He says, "Well, do you think you want to be a race car driver?" And I looked at him, I said, "No, I believe I want to be a mechanic like Junior." And, he started laughing at me. And so we got done, and my dad said, "Now remember, when we get back to the hotel, you don't tell your mother anything." And I said, "Well, I won't." So we get back, and my mom, she says, "Well, how was your day?" And I said, "Oh, it's great, Mom." She said, "Well, did you do anything fun?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, I learned a lot working on the race car. They gave me some duties to do and some stuff. She said, "Well, did you do anything exciting?" And I said, "No, not really." She said, "You dumbass." She said, "I saw you on television." I went, "Oh." And she looked at my dad, and she started in on my dad. So I went to his rescue, and I said, "Mom," I said, "you know what a turd I can be." I said, "I just aggravated him till he finally just gave in and let me go." So I saved him, and but she got over it. But it was a tremendous experience for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, you can't cross Mom,
No, not at all. Not Miss Ardette at all. Yeah.
No, God. What part? Before I go any further, what part of DC were you from or around?
Well, I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, and we lived in Springfield. Dad was the division manager for R.J. Reynolds for Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland, and D.C., Washington, D.C. He sampled the White House, Air Force One, and Congress. You could actually, when you took a tour of the White House, you could get a free pack of Winston Camels or Salem cigarettes with the presidential seal on them.
Oh
And in
my God.
fact, I have 6 packs that Dad had that came off of Air Force One that say compliments of the presidential aircraft.
Oh man.
And yeah, and back in I guess it was '63 when the Surgeon General came out that cigarette smoking was detrimental to your health.
Oh, there you go.
President Kennedy decided for optics it would be better not to have the free cigarettes. So he
Right.
had his chief of staff call my dad to come get him, and so he went and picked him up. And while he was there, Jackie Kennedy came out and asked him what he was doing, and he told her what he was doing. And the next day, the chief of staff called him and told him to bring the cigarettes back because Jackie was a closet Salem smoker and she wanted the free smokes back. And so yeah, so while we were there, Dad was good friends with President Eisenhower, with President Kennedy, President Johnson, and then President Nixon before we came down here.
Wow. Well, I grew up on the other side of the Beltway.
Oh yeah.
Silver Spring.
Oh yeah.
So, a small world there because there was a couple of I think Elmo Langley and I can't think of the guy's name that won the Southern 500 in Dale. No, not Dale Jarrett. Can't remember the guy's name, but he was right up to Albany, Maryland, which he was just like 5 miles from where I grew up at. And then we eventually built the shop there and race cars and all that
Sure.
stuff. It's just really a great time, you know.
Well, my first experience with racing, Dad drove the pace car at Old Dominion Speedway in Manassas.
Oh, with the Gores.
Yeah, the Gore family were.
Right.
I'm still extremely good friends with Dickie Gore. In fact, him and his wife came to my wedding 2 years ago, and we still get together and do lunches and stuff. We did a lunch before Bobby passed away. About once a month, we'd meet at Corinne's in Mooresville and have lunch with Bobby.
Right. Yeah. I still see, the Gores at the deal they have at Hagerstown every year.
Yeah.
With the cars and all. And
yeah, Dickie and Gary helped raise me.
Yeah.
They kept me out of trouble at the racetrack on Saturday nights.
Right. Yeah. Great people.
Wonderful
really
people.
Yes.
Yes.
And the old man was.
Al, I tell you what, the one you didn't want to mess with you didn't want to mess with Miss Margaret.
Yeah.
Al's wife.
Right. Al's wife. Right.
Yeah.
He used to pack a gun all the time, man.
Absolutely.
You mess with him. Yeah. That's it goes back there, and it's just a different time, different era type.
Well,
thing.
I tell you what, people don't realize, and I didn't realize until I got older how lucky I was to grow up, who my father was and what I got to do. And I mean, there's people that would have killed to get to hang out with Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty and AJ Foyt, and and it was just normal for me. And they were just regular guys, and they were all friends of my dad's, and I got to know them, and that was one of the things that I was always impressed with. They never treated me like a kid. They all treated me, like I was somebody, and instead of just a snot-nosed punk kid, they treated me, and they expected me to do what they told me to do, and I did.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, it's just a whole different time now, and the things that went, the cars. I mean, the cars are so much different than anything. And I always say, even the drag cars back then, I thought, well, we're really safe cars then. We thought they weren't. And we look today, and I'm going like, oh my God, these cars were dangerous.
It's phenomenal, the changes. I remember when I was Jimmy Spencer and Darrell Waltrip's team manager, we had Darrell's 72 Torino in the shop on display, the first Winston Cup car he had. And you look inside that car compared to what our cars look like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and
Yeah.
it was night and day, and it's night and day different now than it is back then. I mean,
Sure.
it's come such a long way in
Yeah.
safety and whatnot.
Right. Right. It's just, and thank God it has. I mean, because it's been a long time before anyone really got, well, even hurt real bad, but,
Oh yeah.
with the systems they have now, it's just amazing.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Yeah, and I don't know how they get in and out of the cars.
I know. It's
Yeah,
like
I looked inside.
you
We
can't be phobic in there. I can tell you that right
well,
now. It's tight.
yeah. Teresa and I went to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony back in January,
Yeah.
and I looked inside some of the new cars, and I was like, wow. I mean, with all the safety features, the seats, the head restraints, and everything, the Hans devices, how they get in and out, it amazes me.
Well, that's just like you see Cletus McFarland.
Yeah.
He's so tall, and to get in and out of that car is like, I don't know, it's like a piece of spaghetti rolling in there. It's like you got to
And
fit
Michael
yourself.
Waltrip was the same way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget the other guy that's tall like that, but that thing gets upside down. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's like it's got to be phobic. Crazy stuff. And your dad now, he is he still
No,
with us?
Pop passed away in 1998.
98,
And
right?
yeah,
Same year my dad did. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, but he had such an influence on NASCAR, Bill France, and all that stuff. I mean,
Well, back when R.J. Reynolds got involved, they, there wasn't really anything called sports marketing around.
yeah,
There weren't any consumer products that were in racing for the most part. I think K&K Insurance was one of the few. I think Pepsi and 7-Up were associate sponsors for the Petties, and Coca-Cola was a sponsor for Bobby Allison. But there weren't a lot of consumer products that were involved. And NASCAR was in a bad way because the manufacturers had pulled out in 1969, and a lot of the racetracks were in trouble. And so when Junior Johnson approached my dad about a sponsorship for his race team, my dad asked him how much money he needed, and he told him, he said, well, I need $150,000 for the year. And my dad chuckled and looked at him. He said, well, I got 70 million. What else have you got? And Junior said, well, then you need to talk to Bill France Sr. and talk to NASCAR.
yeah.
And so that's how they cut the deal with NASCAR. They sponsored
right.
the Riverside. The first race of the season was Riverside, California. That was the Winston Western 500. Then they sponsored the race in Talladega. It was the Winston 500. And they sponsored the year-end points fund. And see, they'd never had a big points fund. And I think the first year, Richard won $100,000. So it really gave validity to the sport with Winston coming in.
Right.
And I tell people it wasn't as much a sponsorship as it was a partnership.
Yeah.
Because Winston needed NASCAR and NASCAR needed Winston. I think when R.J. Reynolds got involved, the NASCAR marketing department had 2 or 3 people, and that was it. And I mean, R.J. Reynolds had hundreds of marketing people.
Yeah. Right.
And so, Reynolds taught NASCAR how to market the sport. They helped take the sport from being just a Southeastern sport to actually a national sport. That and the 1979 Daytona 500, when I was working for Cale Yarborough and Junior at the time, when him and Donnie Allison got into it on the last lap. That was the first time that that a race had been televised live from start to finish. And the big snowstorm on the East Coast that year had everybody snowed in, so everybody was watching, and NASCAR just exploded from there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was that was amazing. That fight was the best thing they ever had.
Yeah.
You know, it was great. You know,
What I loved is Bobby said that Cale kept hitting his fist with his it kept hit. He said Cale's nose kept hitting my fist.
my
Yeah,
I
he
know.
said I didn't hit him. His nose kept hitting my fist.
I know it was just such a boost for NASCAR coming in there like that. It was wild, really.
You know,
But
and I think that's one of the things NASCAR's missing now is
oh,
the
yeah,
rivalries. I mean,
yeah,
you think about Richard Petty and David Pearson, Richard Petty and Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon.
yeah,
You know, there aren't the rivalries that there used to be, and there's not a lot of you don't have the personalities I think like you used to have.
no,
You know,
no,
you don't have the suitcase Jakes, you don't
yeah.
have the Herb Nabs, you know, the Buddy Parrots.
Well,
You
see, that's what Cletus McFarland has brought to NASCAR.
yeah,
Regardless of what people like him or dislike him or think he shouldn't be there or whatever. But he has put people with the TV set in front of them and have actually they probably brought a couple 100,000 people to NASCAR to make it.
well, you know, they
Different
need,
audience.
yeah, well, they need to remember it's a sport and it's also entertainment, and you
Yeah,
know, and that's what part of what's missing. And I think NASCAR lost its way for a while. I think they're
yeah,
getting back to it by going to Bowman Gray,
right.
go the roots of the sport, going back to North Wilkesboro, and looks like they're going back to Rockingham, and
Yeah,
you know they're trying to gain the fans that they alienated and get the older fans back.
back.
And yeah, because you don't want to alienate the people that got you where you are. You want to draw
Yeah,
in new fans, but you also
yeah,
want to keep your old fans too. So you
yeah.
have to walk a tightrope to balance it
Do
out.
that. But you have to have you're right. You need entertainment.
Yeah,
These people paid to see entertainment. They didn't
sure.
see two guys being nice or whatever.
Oh yeah.
It's you have to have that rivalry with each
Well,
other.
yeah. I mean, you know, Tony Stewart knocking out a photographer. You know,
Right.
it's and Tony. You know, Tony didn't change. I mean, you can
Yeah,
find him whatever. I mean, he's still as passionate as he was.
yeah,
I just saw an interview. They were asking him about, well, what's going to happen if you and your wife are going head to head in Top Fuel? And he says, well, he says, it's not my wife over there. It's just another competitor. And I'm going to put my foot on their throat until their face turns blue and I beat them to the finish line. And I'm like, yeah, that's right.
yeah. That's right. Yeah.
You might sleep on the couch for a month or
Right.
two, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Or in
yeah,
the car.
yeah.
You're right. God. Yeah. Oh boy. Uh, crazy. But that's what every sport needs now. Automotive deal.
Oh, yeah.
Drag same way. Drag
Well, you
racing.
know that I think that NASCAR is finally understanding. I think the lawsuit with Michael Jordan
Yeah.
taught NASCAR that they're you know, Bill France used to say that he was a benevolent dictator,
Right.
and I think the days of dictatorship are over.
Yeah.
And I think that Michael Jordan and them proved that. And you know, I hate to see what's going on with Joe Gibbs Racing and Gerhart
Oh,
and
yeah.
whatnot. That's a shame, but
It
you
is. It
know,
is.
it's part of the sport. I mean, it's grown so big. It's
Yeah.
just inevitable, and we'll see where that shakes out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's it, you know, I can remember a crazy thing and just that circumstances is I was there when Junior Johnson led every lap at Darlington
Yeah.
except the last one.
Yeah.
And the motor blew right there, and people went crazy,
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
it's like, but that's the kind of stuff, that happens. You got to have that type of thing and not that you want to see somebody blow an engine up, but
No.
it takes, it takes all
Well, I mean, it's just
excitement of the
like,
people,
yeah,
you know.
and like the chase and the points fund and
Yeah,
everything that they've done. I think what they did last year to Denny Hamlin was criminal. I mean, he should have been the champion.
yeah.
I agree with what Richard Petty says, and you know, I think that's one of the things that NASCAR needs to do is they need to get an advisory board of like Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Mark Martin, and these guys that raced, and the people that run NASCAR other than the France family, they don't have any skin in the game as far as being racers or been in the sport.
Right.
And if you haven't been in the sport, yeah, you may think that this will work, but these guys have lived it and breathed it forever. And I think that their opinions matter, and they need to be listened to.
Right. Yeah. You got to listen to them and see what they got to say to turn it around and make it
Yeah,
more entertainment. And that's where
exactly.
it's at.
Yeah.
Nobody came there to see a boring race, and
Well,
nobody.
yeah, and the fans. I think the fans like a little bit of what's going on, and I think what they're doing this year for the championship run and everything, where you're not one race and you're out, that getting
Yeah,
knocked out.
yeah, right.
You run all year and then get knocked out because you have a bad race.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not the way that it should be, and
The only
it's
thing they
not.
got to be careful of is one guy or two guys getting way out ahead,
Yeah.
and
Well,
we
I think
like Jimmy Johnson did.
I think the way they've got it structured for this year, I think that they're headed in the right direction, and it should make for a lot better season. I mean, I Denny's not my first choice.
Yeah, I
He's
know.
a heck of a race car driver and everything,
Right.
but I was sad that he didn't win the championship because I felt like leading all those laps in that race and everything, and that late caution with
Yeah.
5 laps to go or whatever, and it cost him the championship. That was just, to me, it was criminal.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And then I guess a bad pit call to top
Yeah.
it off when he made.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at it from the TV side, and I'm going like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely,
Not
absolutely.
gonna come
But
out good.
at the time, they thought they were making the right call, and that's
all you
what's
can do.
always been so great about NASCAR is, yeah, you can make the right call or you can make the wrong call, and that's what makes the sport so exciting.
All right. Okay, we're running short on time on this one, but I'd like to hear more. Maybe we can do make this a part one and then make another one a part two,
Sure.
if that works for you. And then we'll get into the actual museum and what your connection with all of that is today.
Yeah.
And you have so much history. I mean, it's to try and cover it in 20 or 30 minutes is a little tough, but
Well,
especially I see everything on the internet. I'm going like, this is going to be hard to do this in 30 minutes.
Well,
I was much longer than 30 because people,
oh yeah, I understand. Well, I like I said, I was blessed with being to work in the NASCAR, working at NHRA with Raymond Beadle and the Blue Max Funny Car, and Richard Tharp and the War Eagle, and it
that's
was
what
just a dream come through.
To hear more of that, and so the number 2 will be into that and more about you and your connection to these guys, and maybe what you thought of them, maybe you didn't think of them or whatever, but I think that'd be cool, So anyway, all right. We thank you for today's interview, Colbert. And it's always a pleasure. And you're such a legend that can't pass this one up. Can't stop it now. So anyway.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I tell everybody I'm not famous. I'm just infamous.
Right.
My dad was the legend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God.
Yeah.
God. Yes. Oh, geez. So, all right. I'm going to end this one now, and we shall catch up with you again. And I forgot to turn my phone off. Let me get rid of this. Goodbye. No, whatever. Let it ring. All right. Never fails. All right.
I
I got rid of
understand.
it. Okay. All right. We'll exit here, and then we'll set up a time to do the other half of you. So,
Sounds
all
good.
right. Thank you, buddy.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
All
End
right.
this.